Good afternoon, folks. Good to see you all again. I'm Billy McDermott. I'm the product lead here on the Hardenise team at Redshift, and really good to be talking to you all today. So, as Harry says, I'm going to talk about how you can reduce risk and stop losing business by fixing configuration risks. And there's actually a reason why I included the word risk twice in that title, by the way, because by risk, what we're talking about here is your risk profile, the risk profile of your organization that people are seeing, and organizations who are assessing you and organizations that want to do business with you, what they're seeing in your public facing assets when they run an assessment. And there's a really important reason for that, why we're going to talk about this topic, because there's two significant issues that are occurring just now and are becoming more common when organizations don't pay attention to the configuration risks that are within their estate. The first is that it causes significant problems with cyber insurance, and the second thing is it does lose organizations' business just purely through bad security posture. But no fear, nothing to worry about. There are solutions, there are ways of doing this, and we work with customers across the world, and in particular in the US and the UK, who are using Hardenise to actually reduce their insurance premiums, to make sure that their insurance coverage remains adequate, and to make sure that they continue to win business by making sure that the public-facing infrastructure is well configured, or at least people see it as well configured. I'm just going to highlight some issues here with insurance, okay? We've all seen recent headlines working in cybersecurity about insurance. There's poor coverage. You know, Lloyd's of London announcing that they're not going to cover nation-state attacks anymore. The increase in the cost and the damage that comes from cyber attacks rising to $10.5 trillion annually by 2025. Insurance decisions that are going to litigation, okay, you know, the recent Merck v. NotPetya, of the Merck NotPetya case, having to go to litigation to get decisions sorted out. Cyber insurance is in turmoil at the moment. It's becoming an unviable product in some people's opinions, and that's leading to scenarios where coverage is really, really poor and costs is just increasing and increasing all the time. So you're already up against it as an organisation that's looking for good cyber insurance coverage. What will make it even harder to get is that insurers are now looking for organisations to have a much better risk profile. Okay, according to Gallagher's, organisations are aiming to secure cyber insurance need to have an even better risk profile than they already had. Combine that with the focus that compliance teams as well now are putting on third-party risk. So if you've got potential customers who are assessing your posture, like similarly to insurance companies that are assessing your posture, third parties are looking for you to be even better, because according to Gartner's recent report, stay ahead of growing third-party risk. Twice as many compliance leaders now identify third-party risk as a top threat. Why is that? There's many reasons for it. You're probably providing services that are new in kind, maybe because of the technology that you're providing, maybe because of the way that you're using data. You're probably providing services now that were outside the scope of the original business model. So compliance leaders don't know what they're dealing with anymore. You might be a startup or an incumbent, but also the impact of legislation. There's new SEC rules, there's new DORA rules, or we're in the DORA implementation period, along with other changes in regulations and frameworks. There's so many things going on just now that mean that compliance and risk people are putting more focus on third-party risk, and they just will not accept what you possibly could have got away with in the past. Now, one thing that they share, that insurers share, and the compliance professionals share, is that they're all using risk rating products to actually score your posture. Whether you know it or not, it's happening. We all know the names of the companies that are out there. So, some are much better than others, but you probably have already seen the type of report that actually comes back from one of these risk ratings products. How do they actually work? But the theory behind them is generally quite sound at a conceptual level. They're gathering publicly available information about your estate, about your company's estate. They're assessing the security posture based on a number of different standards. And then they provide you with a score or a grade based on what they observe. You might be thinking there, oh, if you've already seen Hardenized, you might be going, doesn't Hardenized do that? Well, actually, conceptually, yes, but how these organizations do it is very, very different from Hardenized. The first thing just to talk about here, and I actually put it at number 6, but I should have probably put this at the top for a variety of different reasons. But the score that they are giving you actually takes time to update. Now, the reason for that, and one key difference between the ratings products and what a solution like Hardenized does, and I'll come on to the detail of that later, is these ratings companies are scanning the entire internet. Okay, so they're having to scan every single website that's out there. So it actually takes a long time for an assessment of your organization that's been done for insurance purposes or done for third-party risk purposes. It takes a long time for that score to update. And we've been talking to a leading financial services company who are using ratings products. And in some cases, and this was last week, there was a scenario where it takes 3 weeks for the score for that organization to be updated when they make a configuration change. Okay, so it takes a long time for ratings products to actually update their scores, whereas tools like Hardenized, and I'll show it in a little bit, update the score immediately or almost immediately. But there's some other limitations as well. First of all, the scoring and grading algorithms that the ratings companies are using are proprietary. There's no standard method used across this category, and sometimes it's not always clear how the score's calculated, and the algorithm changes regularly. You're working to a moving target. Customers are telling us that they really need to spend a lot of time understanding how their score is going to be impacted by changes when they actually happen, and are having to spend a lot of time ahead of the game just trying to figure out what's going on. Scores are circumstantial. Okay, they're based on a point in time snapshot. Vendors may sometimes show, risk vendors may show how a score has changed over time, but the reality is a score is actually based on the here and now. Asset attribution, we see it often reported by customers that risk ratings companies are scoring them based on assets that have got nothing to do with them. So they're bringing in and scoring IP addresses that belong to Google, belong to Microsoft, belong to Amazon, that maybe just have got absolutely zero to do with the organization, and then bringing down their scores because of a poor configuration that the ratings company has actually seen. You know, it's actually incredibly challenging to decide whether an organization actually owns an asset or not. It's a difficult thing to do. We handle it in quite a different way, and they get it wrong quite often. Okay, it's something that we see quite commonly. Reports as well. Reports are designed for non-technical audiences rather than people that are on this call who will actually be affecting change and who will actually be making the changes to the configuration. So as a result, they can appear to be more serious than they actually are. And as a result, they can often get misinterpreted. And finally, a high score does not always equal gold standard, okay? There will be some value in the issues that are uncovered, don't get me wrong, but interpreting a high score as a gold standard is something that you should be working towards, is the wrong approach to managing risk within your estate. But that said, with these problems, there comes opportunities to do the right thing. And it is possible to reduce your risk profile, okay, and stop losing business because of misconfigurations and because of risk that's actually in your estate. And there are quick wins that can be achieved. There are things that you can actually do very, very quickly to start chipping away at the bits of your estate that people could be incorrectly assessing, or may impact your insurance, or may impact your ability to win new business. But there are also long-term plays that you can put in place to set up a defence against rising insurance costs, against low insurance coverage, and against the risk of lost business. There's a number of customers that we work with in both ways, in both the quick win way when we're onboarding customers, and also on the longer term play. Some of the organisations that we work with are working in critical infrastructure. They're working in utilities, for example. Some of them are working in retail. Some of them are working within financial services. Some of them are working in local and central government. But what they've all got in common is that they understand that having good configuration, having your inventory up to date and configured against the standards isn't actually only just about defending yourself against rise in cyber insurance costs and mitigating any risks of lost business. It's actually also, the third thing is, it's the right thing to do, by the way, because you should be able to configure your public-facing estate in line with all the standards and what's actually required. The quick wins, though, that you can achieve really, really quickly. And these are 5 things, by the way, that through our analysis of the ratings companies, they are really looking for you to do to get a high score with them. Is first of all, have visibility of your public-facing estate. Okay, so you really should implement processes where you're able to, at a glance, able to see what domains you have, what subdomains you have, what IP addresses you have, what certificates you have, so that you've got an understanding of what the ratings companies are actually seeing. Okay, you don't know what they're seeing. There'll be bits of the estate that you don't have visibility of that they do, because they are scanning the entire internet on a fairly regular, if not up-to-date basis. Also, they will, despite the fact that they will look at all your assets, what's important from a defence perspective is to look at the parts of your estate that are business critical, okay? And you want to decide that so that you can focus on fixing the configuration problems that they'll identify in the parts of your estate that are more important and that you can afford to put your valuable resources towards. Ultimately, you have to look at this pragmatically. It's going to be impossible for you to fix every single configuration problem that exists on your estate. There's too many assets. There's too many teams who are deploying services onto the public-facing internet. There's too many teams who aren't cleaning up behind them. There's too many certificates that are getting issued without actually being deployed correctly. That just creates a lot of noise and a lot of work that you and your team are going to struggle to cope with. So you need to focus on what's critical and what's really, really important, whilst also having that visibility, as I mentioned in part 1, of the bits of your estate that you perhaps didn't know about. But at least if you do know about them and you know the configuration of them, you have a defence, okay? You can turn around and say, look, we know about that bit of the estate, but it's not critical. There's no vital services on them, and we've simply not got the resource to actually do something about it. Another key area is DNS issues, something we see quite a lot. DNS problems can lead to name server takeovers, they can lead to subdomain takeovers. They are quite a serious issue, and the sophistication of passive DNS attacks and what's actually going out there means that it's low-hanging fruit for potential attackers. As a result, your risk rating companies are going after it. They are looking for dangling DNS issues in particular. So you should be looking at those and trying to fix those. Also, if you don't already have one, you should have some basic asset configuration and application security policy in place. Even and I'll talk about the hard and eyes approach to this. Use something that can be pretty straightforward to get a list of what you should be configuring well on your email servers and on your internet servers. You should know how your certificates should be configured and should be deployed in line with best practice. And actually, it doesn't take too much to create a basic policy there that you can use to decide whether your hosts are configured well or not, and then help your team to understand how that should be applied. And the final one of the big targets for the rating companies is out of date frameworks, out of date libraries, out of date applications that are actually being used within your estate. So you do need to set up a regular patch cadence. If you're not doing so already, just make sure that they're not going to ping you for any vulnerabilities that would have been resolved simply because of an out of date bit of software there. Make sure that you're following the advice from the vulnerability management platforms for the CVEs that are being issued, and keep things as up to date as you possibly can there. And those are short-term things, and those are things that you can actually do and start to do really, really quickly. But the long-term best practice, it is a bigger project, it's a bigger program of works, but it is something that's absolutely achievable by following what has been defined now as a CTIM process, a continuous and threat exposure management process. So by scoping, actually understanding your entire estate, by being able to get your arms around all of the assets that you actually care about, by having a discovery process in place that is continuous and is updated automatically without any human intervention actually involved. A process that allows you to prioritize, identify the risks that are more likely to lose your business, the risks that are more likely to impact your cyber insurance policy. Also validate, make sure that the risks that are being brought to your attention are right, that they're not false positives, and that they are likely to have an impact. And also make sure there's a process in place that allows you to take action, okay? That you have the steps and you have the necessary information to hand so that you and your team can actually make an impact and actually can effect change and get to the problems before the ratings companies get to them, or before a potential customer actually sees the problems. An example of this on working in long-term best practice, if I just get back to about prioritization, validation, and in particular mobilization, one thing that you can do that falls into those latter three parts is just making sure that there's a step in your development and deployment processes that runs a security configuration check against an asset before it's deployed, making sure that if it doesn't meet the policy that you've defined, then it provides guidance to your developers, to your engineers, that will actually help them to support and fix it. Education is a huge part here. Understanding how a policy, understanding what a policy is one part of the problem. Understanding how a policy should actually be deployed is another part of the problem. And then the third part of this is just maintaining a process to check if a configuration has changed. It would amaze you the number of customers that we do talk to who go, "Oh, it's brilliant, I fixed that once, I don't need to worry about it again." Actually, don't often have that much control over how things are being deployed and how things are being changed. So you need to have a process in place that allows you to check if any configuration has changed within your estate. So that's how both in the short term, you can do it, you can get some quick wins. Then in the long term, how you can do it. I'm just going to show an illustration of how Hardenized, powered by Redshift, can help you do that through our asset inventory, through our analysis tools, and through our ongoing and continuous monitoring. We give you a full up-to-date inventory of all your assets. There's no human intervention actually required to do that. We connect to both public data and your own estate to find all the assets that you actually care about. As soon as we find all those assets, we begin to monitor it, and we actually tell you what is well configured within your estate and what requires some improvement. And we do that at a really granular level. We give you configuration warnings, we give you configuration errors. You can zoom in on the parts of your estate that are really important to you and fix those, and you can ignore the bits that you don't actually care about. And importantly, I mentioned at the beginning of the session, the ratings company information is out of date. Often it's weeks, if not months, out of date. Hardenized data updates automatically within 24 hours. The assessment will run itself without any human intervention. But if you do change something in the configuration of your estate and you want to check the configuration of it on demand, we do have a retest facility. You can check the configuration of a host as soon as a change is actually made. Hardenized is part of the wider Redshift suite. Every product that we have will help you to reduce your risk, whether it's our on-domain tool that will help you to stop phishing attacks through domain lookalikes, or whether it's our on-DMARC solution that helps you to stop email impersonation attacks through authentication. Where it's a shared platform, all the data is shared across the product. It's a unified model, and we integrate with your existing security stack through our APIs. So that's all I wanted to cover off today. Thanks so much for your time. I just want to check before we wrap up if there is any questions that anyone has.
Hi, Billy. That's great. So we had quite a few questions here. The first that we had was around integrations and whether there was plans to integrate ServiceNow as part of the solution.
That's a really, really good question. We understand that people want to take the information from the Redshift platform and take it into their own environment, into their own SIEM environment, and we're handling that in two different ways. Actually, the first way we're going to do it is by creating a ticketing system within the Redshift platform itself. We're calling that issues. And that means that for every configuration warning and configuration error that exists within your estate, you'll be able to create a ticket and triage it. You'll be able to receive an email about that issue itself, and you'll be able to update it. But the second way is because we know that people do prefer to use their own environment, we'll also be offering an integration with the leading SIEMs so that you can actually push those notifications into your own environment. And that issues feature is available to our existing customers as an early release. And if anyone would like a preview of it, please request a demo and we'll be happy to walk you through that.
And one that we had was around these rating companies. And people say that because their insurer uses them, that it makes sense that you should also use a rating company product. So how do you go about answering that?
That's a great point, and sometimes people feel under a little bit of pressure to use the same ratings companies as their own insurers do. Now, there's a couple of things. Now, we do have customers that use Redshift and use the hardenized part of Redshift as well as using a ratings product, okay? And the reason they do that is they do want to have a view of what their insurers or what the ratings companies are actually seeing about them, so they can compare it to the accurate picture and hardenise and the up-to-date picture. So they take the utility company I was talking about earlier, they do that. We had an issue with a certificate for them a few weeks ago back. They were looking for advice and they said, well, Billy, Hardenise is telling me this bit is incorrect. But the ratings company is telling me this bit is incorrect. What's the right answer? And we were able to help them understand how our view was correct and the ratings company's view was out of date. So one thing is that, we'll naturally we want to talk to you if you are interested in this space. If you are talking to the ratings companies, then that's something you can do. But the main questions I'd ask, I'd be pushing them on data accuracy. How often do they actually update the assessments? I'd be pushing them on how quickly it takes them to make a change and update the assessments if you do notify them that they've been incorrect. That's the two areas that I'd look at. And then the third one, which is arguably the most important, is attribution. How can they guarantee that the hosts that they're assessing on their behalf actually belong to you? Do you know how we do it at Redshift? Because we ask you which assets belong to you. We monitor what you tell us to do, and then we'll find other stuff and we'll still ask you, we'll go, does that actually belong to you? We're never going to monitor something that doesn't belong to you without asking you first.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's that personal approach to any account. Everyone's environment is different. I suppose on that point, you had a question here around data sources and how really what data sources does Hardenise use to get the most up-to-date information?
Brilliant question. Because we don't rely on cached data. Okay, our primary source of information is internet data, real-time internet data. We parse host information from certificates that are being issued to the public internet. And to give you a size of the scale of that, we look at every single certificate that's issued every day, and currently that is 10 million certificates every single day that we look at. And we will see those certificates, generally speaking, within 10 minutes. Okay, so we find up-to-date information about your estate before anyone else does. And that's how Hardenise can do what it does so quickly. We're not relying on any other sources. We're not relying on cached information. We're looking at real-time internet sources. That sometimes isn't a fully complete picture. We'll get most of your estate that way. So to complement it, we connect to your estate. Okay, so we connect to your cloud providers. We support integrations with AWS, with GCP, with Azure. We support integrations with Entrust, with DigiCert. We support integrations with NS1, with Cloudflare. So the major cloud providers, the major DNS providers, the major certificate authorities, and the major registrars like CSC, SafeNames, and MarkMonitor, we'll connect to those on a daily basis and import any new domains or DNS zones that we see that belong to you.
A lot of data.
A lot of data.
Data. And looking at the time, I think this will be the final question here. So around certificates and that notification for companies of when they're going to expire, really a question I think is, how are people notified? Is it purely through email? And secondary to that, how long before the certificate is due to expire is the alert provided? As in, how much notice are people given?
Great point. And I didn't go into this too much in the presentation, but one of those kind of key areas of your configuration that the ratings companies are going to be looking at is your certificates. They will score you badly if there's any expired certificates in your estate. So it's really important that you know about expired certificate or certificates that are due to expire beforehand, so that you can take action either by revoking the certificate and uninstalling it, or by replacing it with a new one. That's really difficult to do in big estates. It's actually nearly impossible to do in big estates. You're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of certificates in some case. Now that problem, Harry, is only going to get bigger, because the intention is, and the direction of travel that most of the CAs are going in, is that they're going to reduce the lifetime of certificates down to 3 months. So if you're working with a provider right now, for example, where their certificate lifespan is a year, if they drop that to 3 months, that quadruples the number of certificates that you need to monitor. So it's important, really important, you have some way of monitoring all of your certificates as they're getting issued, but also seamless expiration monitoring. Every time we find a certificate that belongs to you, we will start to monitor the expiry date of it. And if it gets close to the renewal date and it hasn't been renewed yet, we will trigger a notification. Those emails come by email, and you can also use our API to receive those notifications into your own environment as well. Importantly, those notification timelines can be configured to suit your needs. So by default, we do it 14 days beforehand. We'll start to tell you then. But if you've got a 30-day service level, quite a few of our customers do, if you want to replace a certificate 30 days beforehand, set the notification to 45 days, and that gives you 2 weeks to fix the certificate before you reach your 30-day service level.
That's brilliant, comprehensive answer. So yeah, it's an interesting point when you say with the dropping to 90 days, you're looking at 4 times the certificates. So it's an extremely important and current issue. Well, brilliant. That wraps it up for today. I'd like to thank you all for attending this Redshift webinar. We will be sending a recording over to you via email shortly over the next coming days. So with that, I'd like to say thank you and to enjoy the rest of your week. So it's bye from me.
And bye from me. Thanks everyone for coming along. Cheers.
Cheers.